Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. A very warm welcome to Wednesday's edition of the DCU Daily. You can follow me on X, Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to you. Welcome to my daily DCU video, and I have another world exclusive for you. So start drinking that tea, because I've got some tea for you. I can confirm that Constantine 2 has been greenlit by David Zaslav, not DC Studios, David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery. He has been in very, very big meetings and discussions with Keanu Reeves and the people involved with the first Constantine movie. But the reason that Constantine 2 has been greenlit is because David Zaslav is now working with another kind of, let's say, placement with DC. He's looking to greenlight a bunch of individual DC movies because he's concerned that Superman will flop. And if Superman flops, the DCU will be cancelled by David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery. But Mick, we already know Constantine 2 is happening. No, you don't. You've heard from the director saying it's never been so close as it is now. But I can exclusively reveal that Constantine 2 will happen because David Zaslav believes the DCU will not be successful, and that's why that movie is happening. And you can expect quite a few movies labelled as DC Elseworlds, but the reality is that David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery are looking to greenlight individual DC movies. Exactly what I said they should have done instead of greenlighting James Gunn's DCU. That should never have been a thing, because as I've said before, you want these kind of individual visions by these auteurs. You want different directors to have their different corners in DC Universe. Because if you allow these directors to have their individual corners, there's a chance to make money and to make great art and to make great DC Comics adaptations because their heart's in the right place. The Batman is an outstanding film. I can criticise its white racism, but it's an outstanding film. It's a solo take from Matt Reeves, an auteur, writer, director. Now, imagine if there was never a DCEU, and Zack Snyder, Nolan, and Goya did Man of Steel. And Batman v Superman wouldn't have happened if there was no DCEU. That was about chasing the MCU, trying to make money. But let's just imagine. $650 for Man of Steel for an individual kind of vision. Not bad. Nearly $900 million for Batman versus Superman for an individual project, continuing, from Man of Steel. But you look at all these kind of films from individual people. David Ayer's actual Suicide Squad, imagine that. Because that's the thing. These movies that people call bad and flops weren't actually bad, and they weren't actually flops. Man of Steel wasn't bad. 650 is a solid piece of box office. I agree a Superman movie should be bringing in more money, but is it that just Superman isn't relevant enough to the general audience to bring in $800 to $1 billion? We will see how much James Gunn's Superman will bring in. My point is that individual visions are the way to go, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe will continue to struggle in this kind of package thing. It worked. It doesn't work anymore. People are tired of Easter eggs. People are tired of cameos. People are tired of post-credit scenes. People want to see real movies. And Constantine 2 will be a real movie. I can't even remember for the life of me if the first Constantine was even successful. I don't think it brought home a huge box office, but it's a neat movie. Now, I don't think that you know, when you're casting a Constantine, that Keanu Reeves is the one you go to. But at the time, he was a huge movie star, and he did a really good job. He did a good job. He performed it well. He loves the character, and he wants to do the sequel. And if it's successful, maybe we'll get a third movie as well. So what's happening here is, with the green lighting of Constantine 2, is David Zaslav hedging his bets, because he's starting to lose confidence in James Gunn and Superman and the DCU. He's starting to realize that a franchise maybe wasn't the best way to go, because he can see certain things happening. For example, there's certain projects, individual projects, that are being battered away by DC Studios because they have nothing to do with the DCU. James Gunn, I can also exclusively reveal to you that he has rejected Alfred Goff and Miles Miller's, Michael Rosenbaum's and Tom Welling's idea to do a Smallville animated series. Nothing to do with the DCU, not interested. That's getting batted away. Superman and Lois was cancelled. We already know that because it had nothing to do with the DCU. Even though Superman and Lois could have continued under the banner of DC Elseworlds. As the CW is now gone from WB, it could have been an exclusive Max project. Why not? People were watching Superman and Lois. People enjoyed Superman and Lois. There was no logical business reason to cancel Superman and Lois. The only reason, was James Gunn's ego. That's it. And as we've seen, he has got one hell of an ego. I don't dislike the man. Solid writer-director, as we say every day. But that's not the point. A writer-director shouldn't be a co-CEO of what's allegedly a studio. But DC Studios, as I keep on saying, isn't a studio. What DC Studios is a logo. It's an illusion of a studio. It's them wanting us to think they're as professional as Marvel Studios. Because Marvel Studios, kind of a bugbear for WB is that Marvel Studios was created. And as an independent studio, that's a bugbear for them. It's embarrassing for WB that they've made a mess with DC for so many years. But the reality is, before there was a DCEU, there was a Superman 78, there was a Superman 2, there was a Superman 3, there was a Batman 89, there was a Batman Returns. There was a Joker movie. There's been a lot of, there's been a Dark Knight trilogy. There's been a lot of great stuff that's come from DC, but it wasn't franchised. And all of a sudden, once the MCU became successful, DC's bad because it's never had, a self-contained, connected franchise. And that was just a trend, what the MCU did. People want to see great movies. And David Zaslav is starting to realize that going with Gunn, going with this franchise, could be one hell of a bad mistake. Because Gunn has a mentality towards comic book movies. And his mentality is that these characters are silly. And sometimes he tries to make them silly. Now, there's a lot of good things in Peacemaker that I enjoyed, and the Suicide Squad, and his Guardians trilogy. But when you appoint a writer-director like this, as the co-CEO of DC Studios, there's only one shape you're going to see the projects come out. They're not going to be a DC fan's wet dream. They're going to be from the mind of James Gunn, who always delivers things in one way. And that's the issue here. And I think that Zaslav is starting to see that there's a huge problem here. That there's, if there's no room, because James Gunn keeps on talking about DC Elseworlds, but the reality is, where are all the Elseworld projects? We should be getting as many DC Elseworld projects as we are DCU projects. Where are they? Do you think there's not auteur directors out there coming to WB and saying, please let me make this, please let me make that? Of course they are. And they're not being allowed, because It's James Gunn who gets to decide what a DC Elseworld project is, and that's a problem. Elseworld means outside of the DCU, outside of that connected universe. And really, if you've got great directors, great writer-directors coming in and saying, let me do this, let me do that, we'll never know what went wrong with Joker 2. Because the mentality of Joker 2 was very different. I think, let me tell you, I enjoyed Joker 2. And I think the facet of it being a musical was the reason it flopped. But I think Joker 2 is an apology to the extreme left for the first Joker. That's what it is. So he goes against the fans enjoying it, because there's this new trend in Hollywood now. Let's not make movies about bad guys because of what's going on in America. Right? That's what they're saying. Let's make movies about good people. But what's a good person? That's interesting, isn't it? Because Hollywood have got an interesting idea what a good person is, considering 70 to 75% of the people in Hollywood are not actually good people. So like, woke Hollywood got very, very upset about Joker, right? So Joker 2 was like an apology to those people for the first Joker. That's obvious, and that's where that film absolutely went wrong. Because Joker had to face up to what he did, so they killed him off in the end, right? And that upset a lot of people. But instead of, making an apology movie, Todd, you could have continued your black label idea. And here's the problem. So they don't want to make movies about bad guys anymore, because apparently that's not a good thing with what's happening in the world. Imagine that. We were told off as a House of Dragons fan base for loving Matt Smith's villainous character because he's a bad guy and we should hate him. And I've said this before. Imagine in the 80s with J.R. Ewing. We all loved J.R. We all laughed with him, but he was a villain. These days it would be bad. Why'd you love J.R. Ewing? Because he's fun. Bad guys are fun. Bad girls are fun. What's your problem? But Hollywood have gone insane, right? And this is why they're on their knees and they're on the verge of bankruptcy. But anyway, this is why Zaslav has greenlit Constantine, because he has no faith in James Gunn. Gunn should never have been allowed to be the co-CEO of DC Studios. James Gunn should have been allowed to make the DC projects he wanted. As I say every single day, it's getting boring to this point. All these brilliant directors could have their own corner, including Zack Snyder, and James Gunn could have his own corner, doing what he does best. But being in charge of DC, I don't know what Zaslav felt for qualifies James Gunn to be in charge of DC when you've got someone like Bruce Timm about. Although that last Batman animated series they did a sequel series, didn't they, to Batman the animated series, and yeah, that was very, very current day, so I don't know what happened to Bruce Timm there, but he was working with J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves, so that might explain it, that wasn't all, or maybe at all, Bruce Timm's fault. Bruce Timm, after everything he's done with the animation, would have been my first choice to run DC Studios. Someone who understands the comics, understands the hardcore fandom. James Gunn doesn't understand the hardcore fandom. He's a fan of certain comic book characters, and I don't think he's a Superman fan, by the way. As we've said many times, he was forced into doing a Superman script so he could make the Suicide Squad. And then Peter Safran, the co-CEO of DC Studio, his partner, strong-armed him into directing Superman because Gunn didn't want to direct Superman. So, as I keep on saying, it's not a good environment that a director has been forced into a Superman movie. That can only go one way. But we'll find out if Superman's a great movie or a bad movie or a mid movie. We'll see if it makes money. Time will only tell. But Zaslav has one advantage that we don't. He's probably seen a cut of that movie, or a multitude of cuts of that movie, and that's why he's probably getting nervous, and that's why he's greenlit Constantine, because I'm very surprised that Constantine 2 is happening, but very happy that it's happening.